so much for coming. I hope you all had a really good lunch. That last minute of waiting to start my talk felt like the longest minute of my life, but I'm really glad to be here, and thank you for joining me. I'm going to be telling you about our journey making Love and Pies and how we went from pivoting a game a bunch to amazing retention numbers. Hopefully you can learn some things from me. So who am I? My name's Jade. I'm a game designer. I work at Trailmix on Love and Pies. I previously worked at King for 2 years, and I was a level designer at that time. I am a really big Outer Wilds fan, so if anyone's played that game and wants to talk to me about it, please come grab me. My coworkers are kind of sick of me talking about it, so for the past 3 years. So this is my cat Bug. I thought that was really important to mention. If you want to follow me on Twitter, my handle is there, and they'll also be at the end of the presentation. I will be asking some rhetorical questions to you during the presentation, but I don't expect you to say anything out loud, and you can have some time to answer questions at the end. So, to start off with, we released Love and Pies back in September of 2021 to amazing retention numbers. We had 60% day 1 retention, 22% day 30, and 10% day 180. And these are astronomical numbers for our first game. In addition to the amazing numbers, we've also received amazing feedback from our community. Our game contains some really diverse characters, and this is reflected in the people that love our game, and they really love that about it. But some of you might not even know what Love and Pies is, and I'm going to tell you. So Love and Pies is a casual merge 2 game where you merge items together and you serve customers. You earn coins from serving customers, which you can then use to decorate your cafe and progress through a story. So the story follows the main character, Amelia, as she travels back home and finds that her family cafe has been burnt to the ground. And her mother's gone missing, and her old school love is now back in her life. And what you do is you travel through the story as well as renovate the cafe. So it's essentially an endless game with story elements. So where are we right now? I'm going to be using this image a lot during my presentation. The title of my presentation is The Desire Path, which is the path less walked. And right now, Love and Pies is unsuccessful. It's all the way over there. But how did we get here? Good question. Obviously, it's not as easy as launching a game and getting these incredible numbers, which we'd never seen before. So I'm going to start off right from the beginning. I'm going to be using the word pivot a lot, so please don't get mad at me. And I'm going to start you off with the first few pivots that we did for Love and Pies. And what better way to tell you about it than telling you about my first day at Trailmix. Alice worked with me and she was there, so it's very traumatic. So I joined Trailmix back in June of 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic. So I was remote. I'd never worked at a startup before. I worked at King, which was a massive company. So obviously, I was really, really excited to join Trailmix and make something new. And so I was like, oh, okay, cool, this is going to be easy. I was then invited to this meeting called Playtest 3 Early Results, but didn't really think much of it. I just wanted to start making some levels and get used to the editor. Yay, that's my job, I'm a level designer. And then everything set on fire and we all died. Okay, maybe not, it wasn't that bad, but it really did feel like that at the time. So after we started making some levels, our playtest 3 results came in, and what we did was we tested our game over the weekend with a small group of players to see how it performed, focusing on our retention numbers. And the retention came out to 34.6%. And I'd never launched a game before, so I wasn't really sure what the big deal with this number was. But what I did know was that we weren't happy with it, which is why we had a really scary meeting. So now I'm going to go into my first week at Trailmix and tell you about that journey, because it's just as fun-packed as my first day. So what we figured was the retention for the game was bad. We needed to do better. We were already working on a new meta. So at the time, we figured that our meta was quite boring. And so we were working on something new. And so we figured that maybe it was the core that was not very good and needed improving. So right now on the path, we're right at the beginning. We don't really know what's ahead of us, and we don't know how to get to that place. And so what we decided to do was make 3 new cars. So these are the car gameplay mechanics that we prototyped within 1 week. So we made a match 3, and I don't know if you can see this, but it's a match 3 with murder mechanics. So you match 3 the same color together, and then it merges to the next color. And then there was the Tapper. This was the car that we were already working on that we'd soft launched and brought us back those not ideal numbers. Again, it functions like Toon Blast. You tap on the colored tiles and, well, not like Toon Blast, they merge together and fun stuff happens. And then we also started working on a linker. So if you've played Best Fiends, it was very similar to that. But again, as you can see, it's got merge mechanics. And as a team, we were really adamant to make something brand new that players had never seen before. At this time, the market was really saturated, as it still is now. And so we felt like if we wanted to stand out within the market and make a really successful game, we wanted to make something that players hadn't seen before and was really, really easy to do UA for, which is why we added these cool new merge mechanics. And my favorite of the 3 was the linker. I thought it just felt really smooth. I really liked making levels for it. And it was mine and the developer who's working on it with me's favorite. But Kenny, oh, wait. The other thing is we actually also started working on a Merge 2 game, ironically, alongside this. But we decided to scrap it because we were adamant to make something new. Like I was saying, we wanted to get ahead in the market and make something that really stood out. And none of us were really very excited about this concept at the time. So what we did was we went ahead and tested these 3 cars. Each of the cars we soft launched and A/B tested with probably a few thousand players within each group. And can you guess which one won? You don't need to answer the question, it's rhetorical. The Tapper won. And this was the car we were already working on. When we did the test, we were making some improvements to the Fatui, which is the onboarding. And we also tested this alongside the new meta. And it came out with a 40% day 1 retention, which I was like, okay, well, it's better than the previous one. It's better than 36%. Can I just start making levels now and do my job? But before I go on, I want you guys to think to yourselves if you can see any problems with the way we tested our cars. I will tell you in a bit, but I'd like that to sit with you to see what you think. So in addition to testing these new cars, even though we pivoted to a new meta, we kind of decided that it really wasn't very fun. We played it and we thought maybe the retention was to do with the story or the gameplay, and the meta just wasn't good enough for us. And so what we decided to do was burn the cafe to the ground. What this was, it was a rework of the meta and the story. We thought that the story was really boring and that it wasn't going to retain players. As Alice said in a talk earlier, if you attended, story is really important. And so what we did was we set the cafe on fire so that when Amelia arrived home, then she found that the cafe was gone and her mother was missing. There was a lot of debate within the team as to whether or not this would actually help. As you may know, building up a story is another content treadmill, which is more work, and that can be super tough for the long term. But we really want to try and see if it would move our numbers. This is the opening cutscene to the game, where Amelia arrives. She's just gotten a divorce, as for some reason all female characters in mobile games do, and then she arrives home to the cafe being on fire. And that's the opening scene. So we burnt the cafe to the ground and we decided to test it with our audience. And there was a massive jump in our retention numbers. It jumped from 40% to 50.5 day 1. And we also measured some of the retention up to day 7. So 29% day 3, day 7 was 16.6%, which was just an amazing leap. And that is what story can do to your game. And it was amazing to see this impact, something that we really cared about. We had a dedicated writer on the team. We had a narrative designer. We had people working on the cutscenes. And so I was really happy about this. I thought brilliant, I can continue making levels and we're well on our way to successful, and there is nothing wrong with the car at all. It was a meta the whole time. We decided to take this shortcut to an engaging story-based meta and avoid the dual story. But actually, that wasn't the end of it. There was another path we needed to go down. As 50% day one retention, that was a spoiler, wasn't quite good enough for us. It wasn't really where we wanted to be. And so even though we'd reached that point, there were still ways to go to reach the targets we wanted to reach, which was 60% day one retention in order to get to that successful. So 60% day one retention is quite a high number, and you don't really see it very often in mobile games when they launch. But we were really focusing on that day one retention being super high because we wanted to focus on sustainability for the game. Trailmix had never launched a game before. Love and Pies is our first game, and so it was our best bet in making something successful. And we felt that if we had really good day one retention, then we can build the game up to be a success for years to come. The market is really tough. I'm sure whoever here works in mobile games knows that or is working on a new game. And so we wanted to make sure that we had the best bets of growing Love and Pies and growing Trailmix for the years to come. And we really wanted an evergreen hit. It was really important for us that Love and Pies was the baseline for the future of Trailmix. And we wanted to make something really awesome. We have a really talented team full of developers that wanted to make an impact on the industry. So after a lot of internal arguments, we came to the conclusion that it was the core that was holding us back, and that maybe if we improved the core, we could then bring our retention up to the numbers that we were wanting. We had pivoted our meta really, really well. We created a telenovela type game with loads of drama and mystery, and it was really high quality, but the core wasn't really matching the standards that we had started with the meta. So I set out to make a bunch of improvements to the car, which was the Tapper car. So these were changes like streamlining the onboarding. We thought maybe with our unique merge mechanics, players just weren't really getting it. And if they got it, then they'll stick around for longer. I made 500 levels for the game so that we had a measure for 30 days worth of content. Redesigned a bunch of boosters over and over again because they never really felt right or like they worked with the mechanic we were making. Streamlined onboarding again and again. It was a constant battle to try and make sure our players understood how our game worked. And so my manager, who was working on these levels with me, was like, now we have to do onboarding again. And I was like, no, please, don't make me do it again. It's been 5 times. Alongside the onboarding streamline, we did some playtest cloud reviews to see if our target audience actually understood how to play through the game. We made a bunch of new blockers, which is basically new level content to make sure that the game was still really fun for our players, even if they're on level 500. And we did a lot of level rebalancing. At the time, the game was soft launch, so we had lots of live data to make these number changes. And as it turns out, a merged Tapper core is really hard to balance. And so we spent so much time trying to get it right, and we just couldn't really. None of these changes were making a difference to how our game was performing. They weren't moving the needle at all. It just wasn't good enough for Trailmix, and I didn't really feel like it was good enough either. And we had a really, really awesome meta, but like I said earlier, the car experience just wasn't there. These are some chat images from the game as well, quite raunchy. But yeah, the meta was awesome, but the car just wasn't up to our standards. So this is what I think happened and what mistakes that we made, which maybe you can learn from. I think that we kept trying to innovate in places that didn't really need innovation. So for example, the merged Tapper car, we didn't really need to do that to stand out in the market. We already had an awesome meta. So why did we keep trying to make something new? We should only really have been making a new type of meta instead of a new type of meta and a new type of car. We spent a lot of time making really small, unimpactful changes that maybe we thought were really big changes, but actually they weren't. So these were the changes I was talking about before, which were the level balancing, the onboarding, which we thought were going to have a massive impact on the performance of our game, but actually they didn't. But we wasted loads of time doing these things. We ignored really obvious flaws in our car and just kept trying to fix it. Instead of fixing the symptoms, we never actually decided to fix the cause of the problems. For example, the levels being impossible to balance, we should have realized that I've worked on match 3 games before, like Farm Heroes, and it was really easy to balance levels at that point. But for this game, it was impossible. And this is the answer to the question I asked you earlier. We didn't test our cars against a proven control group. So what we could have done is we could have made 3 cars with brand new mechanics, and we could have tested it against a match 3 game, which everyone knows. We could have made a game kind of like Candy Crush and tested against that, just to see if it was the car that was the problem. I think the issue was we didn't have a baseline to measure against. The only baseline we had was this new innovative mechanic, and that was a really big mistake for us. So I'm just going to go through the takeaways in this section. So story is important. Alice said this earlier, but it's really, really important as it attracts a lot of retention long term. You saw that improvement to our day 1 just by making the story really juicy. And I think it's a really, really important aspect to the game, especially in the market that we're in right now. Innovation does not equal fun. It doesn't make your game good. Test against a known baseline to prove your mechanics like we should have. If you've got something that you think is really, really cool and your team thinks it's fun, make sure it's actually fun by testing against something that is already known. I think that is really important. Not all changes are as big as you think. You might think that changing to Fatui is just going to change everything and make your game a massive success, but actually you should probably question what is a big change and are these changes big enough to make it the swing that you're looking for? And even though I said innovation does not equal fun, make sure you do leave sparks of innovation in your game. Our story is really, really helpful with UA because it helps our game stand out. I think the story of Love and Pies is probably one of the strongest parts of our game and has really brought it up to a really, really high standard in the market. And it's really, really helped us market the game. Obviously, it's still a really, really tough market, but leaving those like fun things that players haven't seen before in your game can really help with this. Okay, so one last pivot. And this is probably the biggest one that really shaped the future of Love and Pies. And so it's the most important. So at this point, we were still wondering what path to go down. We started going down the Tapper core path of continuing on with the core and hopefully eventually it's going to work. It was the longest path to take, but maybe in the end we could reach the numbers we were looking for. But there is also this kind of unknown path that it was in the back of our minds, like maybe there's something else we can do that was a shortcut to successful to make Love and Pies the hit that we're aiming for. At the same time, this really amazing game was gaining loads of traction. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called Merge Mansion. And it was a Merge 2 game, and it was, I think, the first of its kind. And internally, the team were playing it a lot, and we were absolutely hooked on the core. We thought that they really had something there, and we were keeping a close eye on how they were performing on the market. And so we decided to maybe try and make a Merge 2 game. After a lot of deliberation within the team, we realized that we needed a really, really big change, and that didn't come with making level balancing changes. It came with completely changing what we were working on and seeing the trends in the market and pivoting with that. So at the same time, our team had been working on that Tapper core for a very long time. And we were really, really attached to it. Like, we really wanted to make something new. We wanted to stand out in the market. And so, pivoting to something that was already being done wasn't really easy for us. And it wasn't easy for me either. I was still a level designer at this point when we decided to change the game. And if you've played Merge 2 games, most of them don't have levels. And so my job was basically obsolete. I was a level designer. So what was I supposed to do if we changed our car? But luckily, my team really helped me move into a game design position, which was amazing and really shows how great Trailmix has been at making sure that I wasn't going to look for other level design jobs, as game design was something I wanted to move into eventually, but I had to be thrown into the fire pit instead. So we decided to pivot to Merge 2, and what we did was we set up a 12-week development plan. We wanted to launch in 2021, and this was, I think, back in April of 2021, we decided to pivot. So at the beginning, we assigned our lead designer to start designing the game and working on the car economy. We then moved on to prototyping with a small group of developers. And we also focused on building up some foundational tools. We use Unity at Trailmix, and it's been a really, really great way of building up tools so that designers can make awesome stuff really quickly. Then the rest of the team, including myself, were onboarded onto the project. And our focus was to make 30 days worth of content. At this point, we realized that maybe only focusing on day one retention numbers wasn't the best plan. We wanted 30 days worth of content so we could measure our 30-day retention. So we did all this within a span of 12 weeks. We made a brand new game from scratch. Luckily, we already had a bunch of meta content already because it had been building up alongside the old car. And so it made it really easy to implement this new Merge 2 car. And we soft launched it back in July of 2021. In addition to working on 30 days of content, we also wanted to build up a live op and feature plan, as once we launched the game, making it doesn't stop there. These are casual games, they're going for years to come, so we wanted to make sure that we were as prepared as possible. So what we really wanted to do was focus on the end of content players. Since we were measuring day 30 retention, we wanted to make sure that even if players ran out of meta content, they still had stuff to do. So we were really focusing on making sure that they had plenty of content even if they ran out. We also focused on retention features. These are features such as the story customer, where it's basically a customer that asks for a really, really hard item that takes a long time to earn, but you get a unique reward out of it. For example, you get a little cat at the end of it. And in addition to that, a strong event schedule. Obviously, we didn't have too much time to make a bunch of new events and live ops, but we wanted to make sure that we had an idea of what we wanted our schedule to look like so that on a weekly basis, players always had reason to come back to our game. So this is a slide that the team was shown when we started working on the Merge 2 game. We were given 3 different scenarios based off of how the new car would perform. So scenario 1 is, yes, Merge 2 is brilliant. It's performing way better than the Tapper. So we'll continue working on that and hard launch it, globally launch it in September of 2021. Scenario 2 was it was similar or kind of a bit better than the Tapper car, of which we would still launch the Merge car. And then there was scenario 3, which was worse than Love and Pies 1, which was the Tapper car. And then we just launched the Tapper car globally. So we wanted to launch a game that year, and these are the scenarios we set out for ourselves. So we knew, however it performed, that we had a plan. So it's July 2021, and we're waiting for our playtest results. And obviously, the team were really, really nervous. Look at us, especially me. I was terrified of how this game was going to perform. But as you know, because I kind of spoiled it earlier, we had really awesome retention after soft launching Love and Pies 2. So just to reiterate, we had 60% day 1 retention, 22% day 30, and after we had the game live for a while, we had 10% day 180, which is, none of us had ever seen numbers like this before. We have a very, very experienced team. We've worked at like King, Space Ape, and none of us had seen numbers like this at this point. And so we were really happy about it. When we were given the 3 scenarios, we were also given these retention ratios. with the different targets of what we wanted to reach, of which scenario the percentages are at. And we were basically hitting all of our amazing targets, apart from 30-day over 14-day retention was 70 to 80%, but it was still amazing. So to recap, when we tested our 3 cores, the winning core had 40% day 1 retention. The story refactor, where we set the cafe on fire, had a 50.5% day 1 retention. And adding on the merge 2 jumped it up to 60%. And that is a 20% jump from our original test, which is just incredible from these 2 really big changes. So at this point, we feel like we're heading on to successful. We'd made that pivot into a merge 2. It was a scary path to take because we didn't know what was going to happen. None of us had made a merge 2 game before. Who has? But luckily, we made the right choice, and we ended up making an amazing shortcut to where we want it to be. So here are the takeaways for this section. Day 30 retention is important. We spent a bunch of time looking at day 1, and even though day 1 retention is a really important metric, if your players don't stick around until day 30, they're probably not going to monetize. So it's really important to make sure that your players want to stick around for a long time. So if you can measure your day 30 retention early, then that should be a really good predictor on how much your players want to retain in your game. Set up a contingency plan. So our 3 scenarios were really scary, but what it meant for us is that we knew what was going to happen. We knew that if the Merge 2 game wasn't going to perform very well, that we had a backup plan. And I think that was really important for the team and for our morale. I think if we didn't have a backup plan, the Merge 2 flopped, and we didn't know what we were going to do next, like, it wouldn't have been a very good sign for our team. Big changes equal big impacts. This can go either way. If you want to make a big pivot, it could go really badly. But for us, the 2 big changes we made our retention jump really, really, really massively. So what you really want to do is measure what a big change is for you and make sure you're ready to take that risk. And establish tools that can pivot really quickly. Luckily, we have a really experienced team of developers who made awesome tools in Unity. And what this means was we could pivot quickly. I could get into the new core and start making content without bothering devs very much. And they'd like it when you don't bother them. And it just set up a really strong foundation for us for the future. So this is my last section. It's building sustainable features. So now we've launched a game. Yes, it's doing really well. But now we need to focus on the long term. It's a live game. We want it to run for years to come, and so we need to start planning for the future. And what this means was we had a few focus points after launch, at least in the design department. This was implementing proven features. So these are features that we know perform well in the casual market. We had experience at King. I worked on Farm Hero Saga. So these are features that will make the retention go up or the monetization to go up. For example, piggy bank feature, which we implemented as a tip jar in Love and Pies. Taking risks where we can. So in addition to implementing proven features, we also want to make sure that teams got space to make cool new stuff that we're excited about. I don't think implementing proven features is very fun for a lot of teams, especially designers. And so it's been really important for us to at least take on some features and events that are a bit risky and have never really been done before. A robust roadmap and testing plans. So we made sure to set up so that we knew what we were working on in the future and also enable us to pivot when we needed if the business needs changed. And this was really, really important for us so that we knew what we were going to be working on next. But in addition to that, there are also things to fix. We worked on this game in a span of 12 weeks, and that is not really very much time to make the game as robust as possible. And so we made some mistakes, which luckily we've been able to fix so far, but that's kind of a symptom of pivoting and making a game so quick. So we've had to do economy balancing. None of us have worked in a Merge 2 game before, and so this was new to us. So we've had to retroactively make some changes to the economy, especially when it comes to monetization. some things maybe were too cheap or too expensive for our players, and so they haven't been engaging in them. Lack of reward layers. We realized when we launched that there is not really many things to keep all player types around. It's a decoration-based game, but we didn't introduce decoration rewards for maybe about a year after launch, and players actually really care about that, and these players might not care about the rewards they get for their core gameplay. And in addition to that, there was not really any long-term planning for content treadmills. So Love and Pies is really, really content treadmill heavy, especially with the story. There are also features that required constant updates and new things added to them. Like I mentioned earlier, one of our long-term retention features was a story customer, but we actually didn't really plan very far ahead for that because we didn't know how it would perform. And I think if we did have long-term planning, we would have changed how we approached this problem. So here are the takeaways for this section. Focus on playbook features. So take inspiration from games that are doing really well in the market to start building out your game with content. Royal Match are really, really good at this. They have a bunch of features and a really, really experienced team behind them that they know what does well in match 3 games, and they've added all of that to their game. These are things such as retention-based features like a daily login calendar, monetization features like the piggy bank, stuff that you know works well in other games. Try and adapt it to your new game so that you've already got a bunch of content to lift you up, specifically focusing on what type of KPIs you're aiming to improve. Pivoting earlier avoids mistakes. So, we ran into some problems after launching because we pivoted so late and we only gave ourselves 12 weeks to soft launch. And if we'd realized that the old core wasn't doing very well a lot earlier, we would have had more time to do some long-term planning. And so if you realize that there is a problem with your game, analyze it really closely and try and make those pivots as early as possible. And build a roadmap plan early. This is probably quite obvious, but I think it's really useful to know what your targets are. Our targets were retention, so we built our roadmap based off retention. Perhaps we'd move on to wanting to improve monetization, and so we'd change the roadmap for that. So make sure you're able to pivot as well. So these are my final thoughts. If I want you to take away anything from this presentation, these are the points I want you to take from this. So not all changes are as big as you think. Sorry, I'm going to be repeating myself a lot. So make sure you understand what a big change is for you, and is that really that big? If you find yourself making lots of changes and they're not moving the needle, maybe that isn't a change that's big enough for you. Day 30 retention is important. Retaining players is so important if you want them to convert into paying players. I think we focus on day 1 for a bit too long. Long-term retention is really important if you want to keep your game alive. Focus on playbook features, make sure to implement them as soon as possible, but don't make them really boring. Make them fit with your game as well. And establish tools that can pivot quick. Even if you're working on a game right now that's been out for 5 years, it's always really good to have a conversation about tooling so that your designers and developers have a really easy time to add new content to the game. Yeah, that's it. Thank you. If you want to get me on LinkedIn or follow me on Twitter, my details are there, but I'm happy to take on some questions.
Thanks. So how many levels do you think you made in total is something I was wondering, because I remember it being, we probably did like hundreds, right, for each of the different variants, but I have no idea how much work we binned in the end.
Probably about 700 levels in total.
I really remember when I started at Tramix, also as a level designer, Richard put in my card, have fun remaking the first 50 levels forever.
Yeah, that was basically it.
Hi, Jade. So I was just, in your presentation, you mentioned your team actually tried the merge to game mechanic, and then you abandoned it, and then you ended up going back to it later.
Yeah.
How different was the Merge 2 mechanic that you ended up with from that original concept?
Oh, it was really, really different. The original concept probably only had about 3 or 4 days to be worked on, and the team kind of hated it because we wanted to work on a level-based game, and so the final product was. I think initially the Merge 2 concept was you serve one customer at a time, whereas now Love and Pies is live, you have a bunch of customers at the top. And so it was very different, and we used old art from the other cars when we were making that prototype. Question at the back.
Sorry, just checking that word. So obviously you mentioned Merge Mansion as a sort of an inspiration for the Match 2 mechanics that you would later go on to adopt. Do you feel there was obviously some similarities there where they have the kind of same, especially when you see it in the marketing, the same kind of dramatic story beats that clearly bring people in and keep the retention up?
Mm-hmm. That's a really interesting question. Luckily, so both Trailmix and Metacar are in the Supercell umbrella, so we got a lot of information from that team. So it wasn't like I guess the other idea at all. Our game's very different to theirs, even in the car. So luckily we got a lot of info from them, and I think they added a lot of story later on in their development, whereas we had story right from the beginning in the old cars, and so. Luckily, we've been able to communicate with each other and kind of tell them what works for us, which is story, and then they've done that, and so it's kind of been a very collaborative bit of work. Yeah. Anyone else? All right. Oh, one here.
How long did it take to create 500 levels?
How long did it take to make 500 levels? Oh God. So I started working in June 2020, and we pivoted in April of 2021. So about 10 months. I'd had loads of experience working on casual game levels at King, and so I've gotten really good at it. So I managed to make a load myself. Any more questions? Awesome. Thank you so much. You've been a really good audience. Thank you.